Dear audience, we continue with the program. Sustainable consumption and production is about doing more and better with less. It is also about decoupling economic growth from environmental degradation, increasing resources efficiency, and promoting sustainable lifestyles. We are currently consuming more resources than ever, exceeding the planet's capacity for generation. In the meantime, waste and pollution grows, and the gap between rich and poor is widening. Health, education, equity, and empowerment are adversely affected. Crucially, sustainable consumption and production can contribute substantially to poverty alleviation and the transition towards low-carbon and green economies. To do this, sustainable consumption and production requires building cooperation among many different stakeholders, as well as across sectors in all countries. Sustainable consumption and production refers to the use of services and related products which respond to basic needs and bring a better quality of life while minimizing the use of natural resources and toxic materials, as well as the emissions of waste and pollutants over the life cycle, the service or product, so as not to jeopardize the needs of future generations. It is my great pleasure of introducing Rafael Escudero now, Vice Minister of Consumer Affairs Ministry, to whom I personally thanks for his presence here today to tell us about the future of sustainable consumption in Spain. Welcome, Mr. Escudero.
Hello, Ileana. How's it going?
Hello, fine, thank you. Mr. Escudero, the first question that I'm interested in knowing more about it is that on November the 6th, in her first appearance before the Health and Consumer Commission of Congress, you state that one of the three strategic lines of the Ministry of Consumption was a sustainable, responsible, and accessible consumption plan. Which are the main ideas of this plan?
Hello, good evening. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this international forum. It's a pleasure and honor for the Ministry of Consumer Affairs to participate in this event. Let me explain you, Ileana, in order to fully understand the question, that the Ministry of Consumer Affairs is a brand new one. It was created in January 2020. Until then, in Spain, we didn't have a ministry focused mainly in consumers' protection, especially those who are in a vulnerable situation. In the past, those duties had been located on different administrative places, but never on a specific ministry. This is a really important decision that puts the consumers and their rights in the middle of the political agenda. Likewise, in order to efficiently fulfill our duty to protect consumers' rights, the Ministry has three main work areas. First, gambling, through the General Direction of Gambling. Second, consumer affairs, through General Direction of Consumption. And third, alimentary security and nutrition, through the Spanish Agency for Food Safety and Nutrition, called AESAN. Well, as a new ministry, we are obviously working in a strategic plan for the next 3 years through 2021-2023, and the plan describes how political priorities will be turned into concrete actions focused on consumer protection. The purpose of this strategic plan is to help the departments to put their work online with the government policy objectives and to manage activities in order to make the most efficient use of resources. The strategic plan has been designed to achieve three objectives, linked with the three words that you, Ileana, have mentioned in your question: sustainable, responsible, and accessible consumption. Well, the three objectives of the plan are: first one, develop a leisure and consumption model based in health, social, economic, and environmental policies. A plan according to the European Union policies and strategies, for instance, the Farm to Fork strategy. Second, the second objective is to guarantee safety and quality in the consumption of services and food and non-food products. And third, is a human rights and gender focus, protecting consumers and its rights, especially focused on those who are on vulnerability situations. According to these objectives, the plan will be focused on 4 strategic lines. I'm going to define each line with an example of a political action linked to the line. First line, improvement of legal resources and public policies to protect consumers, developing safer, quality and responsible consumption, and improving the information available to citizens. An example of a measure linked to this line is the enforcement of a Consumer Support and Care Services Act that is scheduled for the next year, for 2021. Second line, regulation of national gambling activities, fostering a safer gambling model to especially protect groups and individuals vulnerable, especially young people, because young people are who have more risk to develop in the future dangerous practices of gambling. An example of this line is the recent and new about commercials and advertising in gambling online, a new and very restrictive regulation in Spain about the commercial and advertising in gambling online. Third, promotion of food safety and healthy nutrition as fundamental aspects of public health and warranty of information to consumers and economic agents of the agri-food sector. For example, a good example of this line are all the normative provisions on taxing, labeling, and commercial and advertising about unhealthy foods and beverages. 4, coordination and articulation of consumer and gambling policies in defense of the common interest and constitutional rights, especially, again, of people and groups in vulnerable situations. An example of this coordination between policies of gambling and consumer affairs is the future approval of a legal regulation loot boxes in video games. The loot boxes are not regulated in Spain and in other countries in Europe, and organization and scientific experts give reasons to think that loot boxes are the front door to young people to gambling. So we have started now the process of regulation in the loot boxes, attending always to the higher principle of protection to childhood. So these are the main lines of our plan, which now in design and will be developed for the next 3 years.
Rafael, for your answer, and you are right, because it was very important to underline that this is the first time in the history that in Spain we have a Ministry of Consumption Affairs, and thank you for your remark, because we agree it's very important, and we are very happy to have this ministry. And another question for you, if you may, is one of the main aspects of this plan is accessibility. And we think it's the figure of the vulnerable consumer, that, as you well know, is a historical claim of OCU. When will it be regulated in Spain?
Well, we know, as you have told, that vulnerable consumers need a legal framework to have adequate protection. Look, one of the matters that the pandemic of COVID-19 has highlighted is the necessity of filling a legal gap that we have in Spain. Of course, there is no legal definition of vulnerable consumer in Spanish legislation. This is a legal gap that we have to cover. But regulation of vulnerable consumers in Spain has been passed in the past in two ways. First, on regional legislation. We have regional laws that define the vulnerable consumer, but with a regional level. And second, on a sectorial basis. For instance, binding this concept, for example, to energy needs. Recently, the government has done this in the called social shield that the Spanish government has developed in response to COVID-19 economic crisis. But a result of this piecemeal or fragmentary approach, groups of vulnerable consumers are out of especially reinforced protections. So to achieve a global protection that includes all the categories, it's necessary to amend the Consumer Protection Act to include this concept. But you ask, where are we now? Well, we are early in the process. We have started in a double way. First, consult the public, asking for proposals of citizens, associations, and interested groups, of course, consumer organizations. And second, beyond institutional coordination, we have created a working group to tackle it widely, a national working group to the government, where are members of the ministries of equality, social rights, economic, and justice. So this proposal, these legal reforms, has two targets. First, the definition of vulnerable consumer, to include under this legal cover all the public policies to be developed by several administrations protecting consumers that, for objective or subjective reasons, like gender, age, or economic reasons, are under a vulnerability situation. And second target, the characterization of a special duty for public administrations and private entities to watch for warranties and rights of people under a vulnerability situation. For instance, in labeling and instructions of products or in consumer attention services. Well, we hope that in the first half of 2021, we will have the necessary change made. But then, we are the executive power, so we have to send the project to the Spanish Parliament to be definitively approved here. If everything is all right, we think that in 2021 we will have this legal covered.
Thank you, Mr. Escudero. In this case, we can say that news are good news. On the contrary of we usually said no news, good news. In this case, news are good news. Thank you for your answer. And in the previous table, we have talked about sustainable food. There are two issues that fall within the scope, I think, of the ministry. It is about nutritional labeling and the adoption of Nutri-Score for farm labeling, and on the other, labeling at origin, which are favorable instruments, we think, to favor sustainable consumer choices. What is the position of the Ministry of Consumer Affairs on this regard? What are the approximate dates of its implementation?
Well, let's begin with Nutri-Score, okay? Well, the Ministry is completely in favor of the introduction of a front-of-pack nutrition labeling. We believe that it's necessary, above all, in the products processes to enable consumers to make health and conscious food choices. But as all of you know, the establishment of a front-of-pack nutrition labeling is fully within the competence of the European Union. Okay, the European Commission is working hard about this big issue over the past several years, but there is no concrete decision yet. Important steps have been given by the European Commission, but there is no a common position yet. Nevertheless, more and more European countries are choosing Nutri-Score. France, Belgium, and recently Germany, of course, for instance. In 2019, the government of Spain announced the intention of implementing Nutri-Score. Now, the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, our ministry, just provides continuity to the past efforts and goes on with the implementation of Nutri-Score. Still voluntary, but we hope that soon mandatory at the European level. Of course, we are all fully conscious that Nutri-Score is not perfect, but it has several problems. First, it should be fully coherent with our Mediterranean diet. And second, it has several problems with the characterization of some foods and beverages. But we think that it's better to start implementing Nutri-Score, and once implemented, try to do it better especially for consumers to take better decisions and choices. So we hope to implement Nutri-Score also around the first half of 2021, so next year. And about the origin labeling, well, this is more difficult for us to be more concrete in this point. Mandatory origin labeling provisions already exist at European Union level for some products like fishery products, fresh and frozen meat, eggs, olive oil, fresh foods, vegetables. These provisions are absolutely important for producers and consumers. About an extension to other dairy products, we are working with other member states and with the European Commission, attending in particular the following aspects. First, the impact on the single market. Second, the economic aspects and the associated consumer willingness to pay. And third, sustainability aspects of the indication of the origin of food. Well, in case of an extension of the mandatory indication of origin or provenance to other products, our ministry believes, we believe, that harmonized rules at the European level are preferable to national measures.
Thank you so much. And the last question, Vice Minister, we think that the fundamental aspect of a responsible, sustainable and accessible consumption is a sustainable diet. In this sense, from OPU, we are concerned about a specific aspect of advertising on healthy and balanced nutrition for minors. OPU studies have been warning for years of the bombard to which minors are subjected to unbalanced or unsustainable foods. Does the Ministry of Consumption Affairs believe that it is necessary to restrict or to limit the advertising of baby food or kid foods? Do you think the current legislation is adequate? And are you going to modify the advertising regulations?
Well, this is a really good question, Ileana. We are very worried about the childhood obesity and overweight rates in Spain. There are many reports all these years indicating this problem of public health. But according to a recently published scientific report about 2019 data, the called Aladino report made for the Spanish Agency for Food Safety and Nutrition, about this, according to this report, 4 of 10 children between 6 and 9 years suffer from overweight or obesity. This figure sounds alarming to all the society, and it is alarming enough to act urgently and take measures to reduce it. I repeat the figure, 4 of 10 children. Besides, obesity and overweight in children of low-income families is almost twice as large as that of high-income families. Economic and social inequality provokes health inequality and should be reduced. It's almost the same relationship between families with primary studies and family with postgraduate or graduate students. So the rate of obesity and overweight in children in Spain reaches the 40%. It is crucial to tackle the problem at early ages because, as we know, child obesity and overweight are causes of serious illness at adult ages, including COVID-19. Although we know that it's not the only reason, the consumption of unhealthy foods is a fundamental factor. It is a serious public health problem, and we have to take action. One of them is to tackle food advertising once and for all. The current instruments, in Spain they call Código PAUS, based on auto-regulation tools, this instrument, although has contributed to addressing the problem, now has proved insufficient. Therefore, we are negotiating with all the actors to improve the regulatory instrument. Our proposal now is to reach an agreement with all the actors in the process to avoid commercials of unhealthy food. We should and we must be able to avoid the exposure of children to the pressure of the commercials, both in audiovisual and digital media. We have to protect them and the public health. Of course, we want to reach an agreement, but if no consensus is reached, the Ministry of Consumer Affairs will take the responsibility and, always under the law, will regulate advertising and commercials according to the principles of protecting health, public, and childrenhood development. So, our principles, the principles that guide our roadmap, are protecting health, public, and development of child and their rights. This issue is in our roadmap, so the situation obliges us to act as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Rafael. So we already know the plans of the ministry. So we have you have a big challenge in a lot of topics. So thank you very much, Vice Minister. I want to thank your personal availability in an event like this, where we believe it was very necessary to present the plans of the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. Thank you very much, Mr. Escudero.
Thank you very much. And
dear, sorry, Rafael, go ahead.
No, just if I have a couple of minutes, let me thank you and tell you and all your organizations that to this challenge we need the collaboration of all the civil society in general and of consumer organizations in particular. We need your help, we need your proposals, and also, why not, we need your critics. So thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Escudero. And now, dear ladies and gentlemen, after the videos, we will have a special session with Professor Jeffrey Sachs from the Columbia University, talking to the Italian internet pioneer and serial entrepreneur Stefano Quintarelli. This session will be transmitted to all the channels. See you soon.